May 1st, 1945. Somewhere after 800 in the evening, deep underground in Hitler's bunker beneath Berlin, 6 children were being prepared for bed. Their hair was brushed. Ribbons were tied. Nitrices were straightened. A nurse who was present later described the scene as being made to feel completely ordinary. A mother putting her children to bed, just like any other night. It was anything but ordinary. By the time the sun came up the next morning, all 6 of them would be dead. Killed not by bombs, not by Soviet soldiers closing in above them, but by their own mother. Their names were Helga, Hildegard, Helmut, Holdine, Hedwig, and Heidrun. The oldest was 12, the youngest was 4. This is what actually happened to the 6 children of Joseph and Magda Goebbels, and what it reveals about what ideology can do to a human being. To understand how a mother could do what Magda Goebbels did on the night of May 1st, 1945, you have to understand who she was long before that night ever arrived. Magda Goebbels was born in Berlin in 1901, the illegitimate daughter of a servant woman and an engineer. Her childhood was fragmented. Her parents divorced when she was 3. She was sent to a strict Catholic boarding school in Brussels, and at age 16 she fell under the influence of a Jewish Zionist philosopher named Viktor Arlosorov, whose ideas she studied intensely for years. Ironically, this woman, who would later become one of the most prominent faces of Nazi Germany, spent part of her adolescence deeply engaged with Jewish intellectual thought. None of that remained. By the late 1920s, she had attended a Nazi party rally, heard Hitler speak, and become so completely captivated that she described the experience afterward as a conversion. Not a political decision, a religious one. She did not simply join the Nazi party. She surrendered herself to it entirely. She married Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's propaganda minister, in 1931, with Hitler himself serving as a witness at the wedding. She became, in the eyes of the Nazi state, the model German wife and mother. Photographed constantly, presented to the public as the living embodiment of Nazi family values. She had 6 children with Goebbels between 1932 and 1940, and every single one of them was given a name beginning with the letter H. Some historians have suggested this was a tribute to Hitler himself. Whatever the reason, those 6 children, Helga, Hildegard, Helmut, Holdine, Hedwig, and Heidrun, grew up at the center of one of the most powerful and most dangerous families in Nazi Germany. They appeared in propaganda films. They were photographed with Hitler. They played with his dog. They were, in every sense the regime could manufacture, the perfect Nazi family. And Magda, who had built her entire identity around this regime, had already decided long before April 1945 what she would do if that regime collapsed. She had spoken about it openly to those close to her, months before the end. She did not want her children to grow up in a world without National Socialism. She did not want them to be captured by the Allies and used as propaganda. She did not want them to live in a Germany that had been defeated and occupied. And so, as Berlin burned and Soviet forces closed in on the bunker, she began making arrangements. Albert Speer, the Nazi architect who later claimed he had tried to resist Hitler's final orders, recalled trying to persuade Magda to let the children escape the city with him. She refused. Others in the bunker made the same plea, including a German Red Cross official who offered to take the children to safety. She refused every single time. The children, she said, were staying. If you are watching this and finding it difficult to process, that is exactly the right response. Hit the like button. This is the history that needs to be remembered. On April 22, 1945, 8 days before Hitler's suicide, the Goebbels family moved the 6 children into the Vor bunker, the upper section of the underground bunker complex beneath the Reich Chancellery. Nurse Erna Flegel, who spent time with the children during those final days, later described them as charming and absolutely delightful. Children who played games, who laughed, who interacted warmly with the adults around them. They played with Hitler's dog Blondie in the bunker corridors. They had no meaningful understanding of what was happening above them, or what their parents had already decided. Helga, the oldest at 12, may have had some sense that something was deeply wrong. Witnesses noted she seemed quieter than the others, more withdrawn. The younger ones, the 4-year-old, the 5-year-old, played as children play. Hitler killed himself on April 30th. Eva Braun died beside him. The bodies were burned in the garden above. That evening, Magda wrote a letter. Not to her husband. To her son Harold, her eldest child from a previous marriage, then 23 years old and alive in an Allied prisoner of war camp. She told him she was staying in the bunker with his 6 younger siblings, that she could not bear the thought of them growing up in a world that came after Hitler. She wrote, "The world that comes after the FU and National Socialism is not worth living in, and that is why I have brought the children here with me. They are too good for the life that will follow, and a merciful God will understand why I am providing this salvation for them myself." She signed the letter. She sealed it. She sent it out of the bunker with a courier. Then she went to make the final arrangements. On the evening of May 1st, 1945, Magda summoned an SS dentist named Helmut to the children's quarters. She told him the decision had been made. Joseph Goebbels thanked Kunz beforehand for helping his wife, in his words, put the children to sleep. At approximately 8:40 in the evening, Kunz administered morphine injections to each of the 6 children in turn, a sedative dose, enough to render them unconscious. Then he left the room. He later testified that he refused to go any further, that when Magda asked him to administer the cyanide, he told her he could not do it. He went to find Hitler's personal physician, Dr. Ludwig Stumpfegger, and brought him back. According to the account of a witness who was waiting outside the room, Magda sat in an armchair in the corridor, not entering the children's room, waiting, trembling, silent. The door was closed. Several minutes passed. When Stumpfegger came out and met Magda's eyes, he nodded without speaking. She stood up, and she collapsed. What happened inside that room, in those few minutes when the door was closed, is the part of this story that has never been fully resolved. The most widely accepted account, supported by post-mortem evidence, is that once the children were unconscious from the morphine, cyanide capsules were crushed inside each of their mouths, one by one. 5 of the 6 children showed no signs of struggle. They died in their sleep, in their beds, hair still arranged, ribbons still tied, exactly as they had been put to bed. The 6th child, Helga, the 12-year-old, the oldest, was different. When Soviet troops found the children's bodies 2 days later, Helga's face showed bruising, marks around her mouth, evidence that she had not been fully unconscious, evidence that she had, in some way, resisted. She was 12 years old. After the children were dead, Joseph and Magda Goebbels walked up the narrow staircase out of the bunker and into the garden of the Reich Chancellery above. It was May 1st, 1945, just over 24 hours after Hitler had died in the same building. According to the testimony of Goebbels' adjutant Gu German, who followed them up the stairs, he waited in the stairwell and heard shots from outside. He went up to find both bodies already on the ground. Joseph Goebbels had been shot. Magda had taken cyanide. Per Goebbels' prior instructions, German ordered an SS soldier to fire additional shots into Goebbels' body to confirm he was dead, then had both corpses dosed with petrol and set alight. Unlike Hitler's body, which had been burned more thoroughly, the Goebbels' remains were only partially destroyed. On May 2nd, 1945, Soviet troops found the charred bodies in the garden. On May 3rd, they found the children in the Vorbunker. Still in their beds, still in their nightclothes, still with their ribbons tied. There is one final detail that historians return to again and again. Before any of this happened, in the weeks leading up to the end, Magda had been told something by a man who knew what cyanide did to a person. She had reportedly been reassured that it was painless, that the children would not suffer, that they would simply go to sleep and not wake up. She built the entire justification for what she did around that belief. Whether it was true for 5 of the 6 children, we cannot know for certain. For Helga, the oldest, the 12-year-old with the bruises on her face, the evidence suggests it was not. The 6 children of Joseph and Magda Goebbels were the youngest victims of the Nazi regime's final hours. They did not choose the family they were born into. They did not choose the ideology their parents had built their lives around. They did not choose to be in that bunker. They were between 4 and 12 years old, and they were put to bed by a mother who had decided on their behalf that they had no future worth living. Historians have spent decades debating Magda Goebbels. Whether she was a fanatic, whether she was a victim of her own indoctrination, whether what she did can be understood at all. What is beyond debate is this. 6 children went to sleep in a bunker underneath Berlin on the night of May 1st, 1945. None of them woke up. If you want to know what happened to the man who built and ran the propaganda machine that made the Goebbels family what it were, Joseph Goebbels himself, his final hours, his last words, and the story of how he rose from a failed novelist to the most powerful propagandist in modern history. That story is coming next on Ordinity. Subscribe so you don't miss it.